Good afternoon to you all. It is a pleasure as the Dean of Faculty of Economics to host this seminar that is included in the seminar cycle, the prevention of violent extremisms and the construction of peace, such pending thematic. And of course, I would like to greet Dr. Fernando Jorge Cardoso from the Clube de Lisboa, the Lisbon Club, our guest and speaker, Professor Mohamed Nuruddin, and of course, I think it will arrive, Agustin Nunes, and the Father Stefan that follows us online. Hello and welcome. It is a pleasure for the Faculty of Economics, as we all know, what we teach and the kind of international relations and political science that we teach are critical approach that is concerned with the people and in a broad perspective to construct a better future, a future of dialogue. And of course, I would like to greet also the International Dialogue Center, KAICIID. And for us, it is in the center of our concerns that to reflect critically about the international situation, solutions to influence political public policies, and of course, to have an approach that is interdisciplinary. And in the case of today, and it's an important approach, ecumenical, and above all, that furthers the dialogue in the specific case between different religions in a thematic, as you have seen, inter-religious dialogue in counteracting violent extremism in Africa. That, of course, the thematic today will be about Africa and Nigeria. But it is a thematic that concerns all the people around the world because, as we have seen in the Middle East and in other contexts, some thinkers and philosophers and sociologists thought that the religious aspect was overcome and that we will have a future where religion was not relevant for public policy, relevant for thinking about violence and extremism. Of course, and we have Fukuyama and other theorists, of course, it was wishful thinking, and for our identities, for our living together, religion is very important, even for those that say that they are not religious. And as I'm not a specialist in the field, we will hear from the specialists, but to think about, critically, about the role of religion and that we can talk and dialogue, can be together and construct, because there are many instances around the world where people from different confessions, different religions, different backgrounds can dialogue and come together. So it is important, above all, to have hope, theoretically to think about these subjects, and of course dialogue with the people that are in the field, that have the experience, the practices of being in different communities and living together. And that's possible. And of course, the KAICIID and the Clube de Lisboa have an important role in furthering and supporting the initiatives that can further this dialogue. Of course, we are in academic context, but opened in a faculty that it's open to the world and that has what we call the Coimbra School, a specific approach to international relations that has a specific concern and a proposal that is theoretically founded, but of course opened to interact with different agencies, from international institutions to NGOs, etc. So it is a pleasure, and this is your house, our house, for this afternoon. It will be open for further initiatives in this field. So thank you to be with us, and we go further for this conference. Thank you.
Thank you. Before Maria Clara begins, I would like to thank you very much, Professor and colleague, for hosting us at Coimbra University. It is an honor. On behalf of KAICIID, with financing this cycle of seminars, unfortunately, his representative had a problem in his way to here, so he will not arrive in time. He will not be with us. But also on name of the Club of Lisbon, which I'm the executive director, and I'm also a full professor of Autonomous University in Lisbon. But I have belonged to others because I could be your grandfather. But anyway, thank you all for being with us. I would like to say that this is, as the Dean said, this is a cycle of 4 seminars. Coimbra is the first one, and then we'll go to Évora, to Minho, and to Lisbon. We put Lisbon in last place, just for them to know how to be, where they are in the hierarchy. The seminars are about the instrumentalization of religion to justify violence on the African continent, and the cycle will discuss this matter, how this matter is reflected in 4 countries, namely Nigeria today, Mozambique, Kenya, and Central African Republic. Each seminar will last around 2 hours. We will have a break in the middle just to smoke and have a coffee. Our colleagues can smoke and have a coffee also, not with us, but among them in each place. And it will have the participation of 4 speakers, at least 2 of them working in the ecumenic dialogue in each one of the countries. The seminar is being recorded for public dissemination, so this is not secret. At the end of the cycle, we will publish an ebook with the sum up of the presentations and of the discussions and opinions. The seminar in Nigeria has 4 speakers. I'm going to present my Father Stephen Ojapa. Thank you, Father, for being with us. He is a Catholic priest of Missionary Society of St. Paul of Nigeria, working in Catholic Diocese of Sokoto. He is also Director of Inter-Religious Dialogue and Ecumenism for the Diocese of Sokoto and the Parish Priest of St. Patrick's Catholic Church, Gidan Maikambu. I hope I pronounced it well. Thank you very much for being with us, Father. Then we will have also online Dr. Matthias Jake. I don't know whether you say Jake or not. If not, I'm sorry. Matthias is a conflict specialist with Development Alternatives International, DAI, in Nigeria. He works on conflict analysis, including dialogue facilitation and preventing violent extremism and ethno-religious conflict. He has an MA in Peace and Conflict Studies from the University of Ibadan. And then we will have also in this table, now presentially, Dr. Muhammad Nuruddin Lemu. He is the Director of Research and Training at Dawa Institute of Nigeria, where he trained the trainers, courses in enhancing inter-religious dialogue, responding to religious extremism among Muslims, and promoting Sharia intelligence, or faith-based critical thinking. Sharia is not, as we used to hear in Portugal, a bad thing, okay? On the contrary. And then we will have also, and you know probably Maria Clara Oliveira, my colleague, Maria Clara Oliveira. She is a guest lecturer in international relations at Coimbra University Her research interests are in global politics and policies and in development issues, which reflects her dual background in international relations and political science. We will do as follows. First, I will give the floor to the ladies, if you don't mind, the three men that are with me in this table. So I will ask Maria Clara Oliveira to make an initial presentation, which will be what she wants to speak about. We are in a free university. And then I will ask our two guests that are online with us, Father Stephen Ojapa and Matthias Jakob, to intervene. And then I will close with Nuruddin Lemu. We were driving from Lisbon to Coimbra, and now it seems that we know each other for the last, let's say, 35 years, maybe. Without further comments, and let's go directly to the business. Of course, after the coffee break, it is the moment where all of you are invited to extract from our guests whatever you want to extract from them or give to them. You can also give to them, no problem. Thank you very much. Please.
Thank you. So good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here with you today and to have the opportunity to participate in what will certainly be an enriching conversation about the relevance of interreligious dialogue for peace building. Before I begin, I would like to thank Clube de Lisboa and in particular Dr. Fernando Jorge Cardoso for organizing the event and for giving me the opportunity to present some ideas. And I would also like to thank the Faculty of Economics and my colleagues who kindly agreed to join the conversation, and finally the presence of each and every one of you. We are currently observing the fast escalation in different points around the world of tensions, and in some cases the religious factor appears to be one of the causes contributing to heightened tensions, and in some of these cases, it is even presented as the main cause of conflict, hiding other factors. But what we will discuss today and what I would like to point out is the role of religion and highlight the positive contribution of interfaith dialogues to overcoming divisions and building cohesive societies with where differences can be accepted peacefully. So before I get into the subject, I think I need to clarify my position. So at no point I have been a participant or a facilitator in processes aimed at promoting interreligious dialogue. So the ideas that I will bring to our conversation are not based on my personal experience, but on a review of what has been produced in the academic literature about this subject. Having said that, let's now move to discuss the place of interfaith dialogues in peace building. And religion is often seen and presented as a divisive factor, but it is rarely the unique cause of conflicts, and it is only when there are other factors that are present that it can be politically instrumentalized to deepen the existing divisions, therefore increasing tensions between different communities, and in some cases these tensions might degenerate into conflicts which can involve some degree of violence. However, religion and the promotion of constructive discussions about it can contribute to unity, to create a sense of unity, and to establish common ground, especially in fractured societies. So although they might be based on a different set of worldviews, use different narratives, different languages, and even different rituals, there are some fundamental objectives that lie at the root of the different religious community, namely that of living in peace and sharing a peaceful space and a peaceful and living in a peaceful community. Thus, the idea of establishing interreligious dialogues is increasingly appearing as an instrument for bringing groups and individuals closer together, whether in situations of latent conflict or also as a way of helping to mend divisions that result from previous or ongoing violent conflict. Dialogues between people of different faiths allow them to come into contact with each other's worldviews, to learn about the values and the visions and the rituals that are central to the other, and also to reconnect with their own religious perspectives, possibly even leading to revising their positions. The aim is not, the aim of establishing these dialogues is not to colonize the others by imposing a vision on them, but to share alternative points of view and to learn to see through the other person's lenses. So these exchanges may lead to the identification of differences and to a better understanding of them, but above all, they should contribute to the acknowledgement of the existence of common concerns and help minimize the negative views of other groups and build bridges. So establishing a dialogue between different groups, whether we're talking about religious groups or not, is often welcome and recommended, but it is far from easy in any circumstance. So in the case of interreligious dialogues and in contexts where there is a certain degree of tension between communities, the challenge might be even greater. And if not properly thought out and executed, this process can contribute to accentuate negative perceptions of other communities. However, if it is used correctly, it can facilitate connections between groups and help to overcome differences, generating more harmonious cohesistence. And in order for this tool to be used effectively and to generate a positive experience, both for those who are directly involved in the discussions or for a wider group, it is necessary to take a number of issues into consideration, and I will address them very quickly in a moment. So the first point that I would like to raise before we even start discussing how dialogues should take place or could take place has to do with the issue of time. Time matters, and it is necessary to reconcile temporalities that can be distinct. So we have to recognize that the time of politics, the time of conflict, and the window in which political conflict needs to be resolved is often different from the time of religion, the time of spirituality. And it is important to reconcile these two moments because when introducing the possibility of establishing interfaith dialogues, this is crucial to ensure that they will reduce tensions. If it's too early, a community or even the different parties that are involved may not be willing, may not be prepared to get involved. And if it's too late, the tensions may be already too high, and thereby this reduces the possibility of participation. But once the initial conditions to start a conversation have been established, it is important that a reflection within each group takes place. So each community should be aware of what it is seeking to achieve through the involvement in these dialogues, and what are the points that need to be addressed. Those who are going to actively participate on behalf of the community have to have deep knowledge about their own religion so that they can dialogue with their counterparts and build effective bridges. So now let's now move to the moment when the representatives from different communities eventually meet to exchange ideas. So the meetings, the literature stresses that they should be designed so that everyone from every community feels comfortable and safe, and so that these exchanges can take a positive, can be perceived as positive. So the first idea that has to be addressed, the first point that has to be addressed, is that the physical space should be seen as a safe space for every party that is involved. And then it is also important to ensure that all participants are will participate in an equal position. That means that any imbalance between the communities should not be brought to these spaces, which should serve precisely to overcome the consequences of prejudice against others and to reduce the inequalities of power that may exist in the society. So the numbers of representatives should be more or less similar, and the role that each community occupies should be very similar too. For these dialogues to be positive, a respectful posture should be adopted, and communities should search for common ground. So there's a need to be tolerant, have empathy, and be willing to listen to the others. But at the same time, each community should be able to recognize that throughout the history or in a specific moment, their behavior might have contributed to generate tensions, and they should be at least willing to recognize that and to ask for forgiveness. But it is also important to put into practice actions that demonstrate the possibility of introducing changes to their behavior. So language is important, but actions are also important. And speaking of language, the language that is used should be carefully considered. The conversations will be more likely to have a positive impact if participants emphasize common ground rather than specifically focusing on issues that are only intelligible to those with the same religious background. And when trying to establish closer links, it is crucial to avoid terms or mentions that might be perceived by others as offensive or that might make them feel uncomfortable. In addition to this, there are numerous practices that can be put into place, so that are likely to bring different communities closer together. So there's the literature based on experiences that were observed in different settings, stresses the importance of jointly reading sacred texts or cross-reading sacred texts and discussing central ideas. Also, the possibility of joint participation in sacred rituals, as long as this is done with mutual agreement from the different parties involved and in a way that is comfortable to everyone. Then the literature also means the importance of establishing collaborative projects, which might mean discussing a specific topic that has previously been agreed upon, or even introducing practical projects which will bring together the communities, for instance, discussing how to use a certain public space together, or coming up with agriculture and social development projects, for instance. And then the role of peace education projects that incorporates religious aspects is also important, because it might help create greater tolerance and openness to accepting different perspectives peacefully in any sphere. So the points I've listed help facilitate the communication and create bridges between different communities. But it is also important to mention that these processes also face serious challenges, such as the possibility of difficulties in understanding the other community that are caused by the use of different language, or by personal and collective experiences, which can lead to some moments in which understanding is not possible. Also, the existence of deep-rooted personal or collective trauma, especially in cases in which injustice or violence is fairly recent, which might make it difficult to disconnect, to look at the other from a different point of view than that of fear and mistrust. And then also we have to be aware of the possibility of political mobilization of groups to pursue certain interests, which might lead to increased tensions. And finally, the possibility that due to the lack of information available, or due to the fact that information is not correct, the processes that have been designed might have been poorly designed, or there might be a difficulty in translating what has been formulated into practice. So I think it is, before I stop, I think that the final point that I wanted to stress is that these processes are not linear. So as any process that aims to mend relationships, they might take a long time. They might face some setbacks at times too. And while I have listed a few points that are considered to be essential to ensure the success of interreligious dialogue as an instrument for promoting peace across the world, this is not a one-size-fits-all strategy, so adapting these tools to reflect the local context and to give a real voice to different communities is central to their success and to ensuring that the divisions might be overcome and that we might and so that we might build a fairer and cohesive society. So I'll stop here and then we can discuss further. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria. Now let's move to Nigeria. Having this broad image, now I will ask Father Stephen Ojapa, please, to tell us. You have to.
Can you hear me? Okay, please, can I share my screen? I would like to share with you some slides. Is it okay?
Okay.
Okay. Can you see the screen?
Yes.
All right. So good afternoon. For me, here is good morning in America at the moment. So it's good morning to me, but good afternoon to all of you there. And I'm so happy to see my very good friend, Professor Dr. Nuruddin. So good to see you, sir. And all of you there, it's nice to be with you. So basically, I'll be talking about Nigeria, and I'll be talking about the complexity of interreligious dialogue. Professor Maria spoke very brilliantly about some of the theories or ideals that should be in context. But I'm going to give some kind of data and some kind of real life experience to the entire conversation Professor Maria talked about. So now, generally, Nigeria is a very complex society. It's complex not because we are not possible, but just because geographically we happen to be dealing with multi-ethnic groups, multi-faith communities from the east, north, south, and west. And politically, depending on where you stand, if you are in the north, you want to say that the whole Nigeria is north and it's more. If you are from the east, you may want to say that Nigeria is both Christian and they are Igbo, but it is deeper and more than that. And I live and work in the northern part of Nigeria called Sokoto Diocese for the past 10 years. At the moment, I'm working in England. And while I live and work there, it is mostly a population that is mostly Muslim. But there are a tiny population of Christians in that area, especially in Katsina, Sokoto, and Zamfara. Now, in the southern part of Nigeria, or the eastern part of Nigeria, where it is mostly Christian, there are also a good population of Muslims. But they are in the very, well, I don't know the numbers, but in terms of ratio, you have more Christians than Muslims. So generally, in 2021, there is this brilliant journalist who did an article about the experience of Igbos in the East. And he did a well-documented analysis of how Igbos have been marginalized in the southern part of Nigeria. Lack of access to so many things, from schools, education, jobs, things that ordinarily should be granted. It was a well-documented analysis that the journalist did in one of the leading newspapers in Nigeria. And in the northern part of Nigeria, Zamfara, for example, there is a community called Gidanzala in Bunguli local government area. 50 years ago, the community was predominantly Christian. Christians were up to 90%. They have now been reduced to about 0.5%. And we had a governor there who wanted to have Islamic or Sharia law. And he had some policies that they didn't go down well with that particular community. So a good number of them left the community because of some of those policies that didn't really go down well with them. Now, generally, when I looked at the experience of the Christians in the north and the Muslims in the south, they all had one single complaint, and that is they were all being treated as a minority. And so they had serious issues of injustice, segregation, separation, and pain. So for me as a priest, I lived and worked in a community that has to do with, I just had to go overboard between communities. And I was very much involved in interfaith dialogue. I had regular visits to communities that are both Muslims, especially Muslim communities, because we are in the minority. And it was also for me a very good PR for my Christian community. Every Eid, every major Islamic festival, I organize my people to go and visit them. And very luckily, most Christian celebrations, I have always had visitations from Islamic clerics to my church. So it was a very good, rapport that also have been influential and supportive for my work. These two men in Nigeria are well known and well celebrated in the field of interfaith dialogue. The other one is a Christian by the left, by my right hand, and the other one is a Muslim by my left hand. The two of them have a very interesting history. Of 20 years ago, they had bitter conflict. They led their own religious groups to a bitter war, which after some years, they came together to build a network of peace called Interfaith Mediation Center. Now, I talk about them with pride because I have used them severally to preach peace in the community where I live and worked in Nigeria. So, for me, their life and their example is a concrete model for what Professor Clara was talking about in her earlier presentation. Now, generally, Nigeria has been going through a lot of insecurity for the past 20 years. There has been a spiraling of conflicts that look like a religious conflict, but beneath it has a lot of socio-economic factors. We have issues of unequal distribution of wealth that could generate tension in the community. We have instability and governance problems, a cycle of discontent. We have the impact of the oil economy. We have a legacy of bad governance. We have the corrosive grip of corruption. We have the poison of identity politics that has led Nigeria to a state of pain and almost disarray in so many factors. We have the competition for scarce resources. We have the failure to combat marginalization. I just gave just one example that you will find marginalized community of Igbos in the southeastern part of Nigeria and the marginalized community of the Christians in the northwestern part of Nigeria. all these are governance issues because we really don't have laws, or we have laws that are not being implemented to support the weak members of each of these marginalized communities. And so, for 20 years, since 2000, Boko Haram came into Nigeria, we have this rise of cases of violent incidences that has bedeviled and brought problem to the country. Boko Haram, I'm sure many of you know the name, the group that began between 2009. These are the numbers of cases, of number of armed men that have terrorized communities right from 2009 to 2024. We can see the number of violent incidences. In some cases, the worst of it in this analysis happened in 2022. And this year is exactly the year that I personally was kidnapped. And I'm going to talk about it in a short while. Now, these numbers are very scary, but they are real. Here is also the number of civilian fatalities from violent attacks by armed groups between 2009 again to 2024. You can see the numbers here, and the numbers kept increasing. And in 2016 happened to be the worst that has happened. Now, if you go to 2022, you will find my own incidents of violence. So all that has happened in Nigeria has a history. So I'm just trying to give a context because in a short while I'll be talking about my own experience of violence in Nigeria. But very sadly, the next map here deals with another very grim reality. And that is in Nigeria for the in 10 years, that have just passed, we have the report of 2,012 students that were kidnapped in schools. Just schools alone, we have this terrible number of people who have been kidnapped. And these numbers are, you find them mostly in the northern part of Nigeria. Yobe State, Borno State, Niger State, Kebbi State, Sokoto, Zamfara, Katsina, Plateau State, Nasarawa. We have a pocket of them, very, very pocket of them in the southern part of Nigeria. But you can see the vast majority of these incidents happen in the north. And very sadly, still there are students who are still in the hands of the kidnappers till this moment. So what has that left? There are many people who are living in fear across the country, many communities. Many communities are living in fear. They just don't know what next is going to come their way. Many of them are traumatized. Many of them are just a moment, please. So many of them are just traumatized and they really have no idea of what's going to happen to them the next day. So we have people who are living in that situation. And so I'll now take you to my own unfortunate incidents. Professor Carroll talked very extensively. On this day, personally, I was kidnapped in my room, in my house, by terrorists. 11 p.m., 11:40 p.m. Bandits came to my house. These men you see, I opened my eyes and I just saw these people right on my bed. They just asked me, Katashi Ikaibaki, wake up, you have visitors. We were 4 in the house that day. And all of us left the house within 5 minutes. We began to trek into the bush. We trekked for 2 days. I was walking without anything on my legs because I was sleeping when they came. At some point, as I was going, I was very, very tired. I had no life. We didn't eat any reasonable food. We drank mud in form of water. We lived in that situation. When we got to where we were going to after 3 days, after 2 days, in fact, before we got to where we got to, I was physically dead tired. I couldn't walk. So I asked them, please, can you, because they were always smoking weed. So I asked them if they could give me weed to smoke for me to have some strength and life. And they asked me, am I smoking before? I said to them, no. They said, well, if they give me this, it might be too much for me because I have not even eaten anything. I haven't drank anything. But I was tired. And the terrorists have a very simple law. Once you cannot move to where they want you to go to, they simply kill you there. So I fell down because I couldn't move. And they brought out their guns to shoot me. So those that were kidnapped with me gave me life at that moment because they all shouted, Father, please, Kadashi, Father, please stand up. I struggled and I stood up. We continued going. I really had no life. I didn't have strength again. So I asked them to just give me anything. I was already ready to take. So they gave me tramadol to take. So I took tramadol. And when I took tramadol, I became completely weak. I couldn't move again. At that point, one of the guys that was there with me, his name is Hassan. He was with his younger sister, Umi. Hassan is Muslim, Umi is Christian. So both of them were kidnapped with me in that situation. So Hassan was the one who struggled to lift me with his hands, and he raised me on his shoulder, and we continued in that perilous journey. When we got to where we arrived to eventually, we were there for, as soon as we arrived, they now came and asked us a very simple question. Zakushashai, will you take tea? And many of them, all of us were very tired and very hungry. But all of us just simply said, yes, Zakushashai, we will not take tea because we are very hungry. So just came close. And they began to beat the hell out of all of us. They beat anything and everything they could beat. When they finished beating us, they kept us in chains and they left us there for the next 30 days. Now I want to show you a video. I want to show you a video of daily life in the hands of these terrorists, what people go through, those who have been kidnapped. The beautiful theories expounded by Professor Clara is challenged in reality by some of this green reality that is always on ground. This is the video I want to share with you. The bandits have become so powerful. They live their lives in such a way that at the end of their gruesome attacks, they put this information on the social media. And this particular video represents exactly the kind of environment I was kept and tortured for 33 days. Please, if you are not having a very strong mind, you can just close your eyes. It's a 2-minute video. I'll play a brief video and then I'll come back to my presentation. this is one of the many unfortunate incidences that has brought people like me to keep wondering what has happened to Nigeria. And some of these kidnappers are still, some of these kidnapped victims are still in the hands of their victims as I talk to you. And I was in this same situation for 33 days. Personally, after 3 weeks of our stay in that situation, one of the bandits came to say to me that it's like my people are not serious with the negotiations, so they have to kill one of us to show the pictures back at home. Now, this man that was shot in the leg, he's going to remain in that situation without food, without water. He's not going to clean that blood. He will remain there. It will fall, as you can see behind. Rain falls there on their heads. Rain, when it's warm, the sun falls on them. There is no roof over their heads. This is where they sleep. This is where they stay. This is where they eat, if they ever give them food. And this is where they also go to toilet. It is that humiliating. It is that bad. So on the third week, they came and said to me, well, it's like they have to kill one of us to send the pictures home. So they asked me, who are they going to kill among the four of us that they picked? I stepped forward. They asked me, am I ready to die? I said, well, I have no choice because I was the most senior person among those that were picked. So I stepped forward and said to me, am I ready to go? I said, yes. They came in the morning. So they told me they're going to come back in the evening. So they came back in the evening and they asked me again, am I ready to go? I said, yes, I'm ready. So they told me that I should just turn back, tell the people I'm with goodbye, and move forward. I stood up. I told the people I was with goodbye, and I stepped forward. So normally when they want to kill you, if they want to be very merciful, they just give you a bullet. If they want to make it very painful for you, they'll take you down the stream or they'll take you a bit far away from where the people are. They'll ask you to dig your own grave. You'll enter halfway and they shoot you. So I was going down that road when one of them just simply said to me, just call Father Kakoma. I was not sure whether I heard him well. When I turned back, I was thinking somebody had already shot the bullet and I was no longer in the world. So when I turned back, I saw them arguing. So I came back. They asked me to go back. So I came back to where other people were. By the time I got there, one of them has already fainted as a result of the shot. So this is daily situations of what insecurity has turned some of Nigeria into, very sad. And generally, I don't like persisting on this, but this is my honest situation. When I came out of the situation, when I came out of my incidents, I wrote a book. There is a book I've written on this called Tears and Torture, 33 Days in Kidnappers' Den. I got access to the phone conversation that led to the negotiation of when I was with the bandits. I got the phone conversation. And it is published in chapter 9 of the book. And I began by quoting a former head of state that says, when insecurity, this is General Abacha, who was once a former head of state in Nigeria, the military head of state, who said, when insecurity persists beyond 24 hours, the state is involved. Well, this is a well-known statement in Nigeria. And I just want to leave it at that. I just want to information. Those who are listening can always make their judgment. So generally, I've always tried to look at life beyond Boko Haram. Boko Haram and insecurity, bandits, terrorists, ICE, ESN in the eastern part of Nigeria have left so many trauma and so many communities traumatized and in their situation. At the end of their terror on the country, they must have left so many families devastated. And the only way we can begin to rebuild our lives is through social cohesion, international involvement, like what we are doing, regional collaboration between governments in West Africa. We need a lot of humanitarian and developmental aid. People are living in their situation. When I came out of the experience, as a way of giving back to those who have been kidnapped like me, I started an organization called Former Victims Initiative. This Victims Initiative helps in counseling and assisting those who have been kidnapped and released. I was kidnapped in Katsina State. So we have this monthly session where we meet with the victims. We sit with the victims. We listen to their stories. These victims are Muslims. These victims are Christians. What unites us is the fact that they have all been traumatized in the past. And the challenges of coordination and long-term commitment. We have to also make emphasis on interconnection between social political issues and insecurity. Now, all of these crises is interconnected. Poverty, I was talking about poverty, corruption, identity politics is fueling part of what we are going through in Nigeria. In conclusion, dialogue and social cohesion are essential. Promoting tolerance of social, interfaith, and interethnic differences through community engagement and education will be a powerful agent of social cohesion. Social programs focused on addressing grievances and empowering marginalized groups can certainly contribute to a more peaceful and inclusive society. On a case-by-case basis, tackling the social, economic, and political causes of insecurity will ensure a more peaceful and prosperous future for all. We would like to thank the many organizations that have been working in this direction over the last few decades. The Puka Center, the Interfaith Dialogue Forum for Peace, IDFP, the Global Peace Foundation for Nigeria, and the King Abdulaziz Center for Intercultural and Inter-Religious Dialogue. I told you about my book called Tears and Torture. I'm sure, I don't know whether I've talked about, the book is on Amazon. Last 3 weeks, I had the honor of giving a copy of the book to Pope Francis. I hope all those who are listening will also try to get a copy of the book to promote the advocacy, to raise awareness as much as we can as a community, because that is the much we can do. I would like to thank you for your kind attention. Thank you and God bless you all.
Thank you, Father, for presenting your thoughts and also your personal experience. I would like now to ask Matthias Jake. I don't know whether I pronounce well Jake, but you will tell. Thank you for being with us, please.
All right, thank you for having me. And if you can hear me correctly, if you can hear me well, you pronounce the name. Thank you. You pronounce the name correctly. It's Yaki. Thank you so very much.
Thank you.
All right. I think over the recent years, I've had to struggle trying to, explain to people that I'm not yet a doctor. I'm trying to pursue a PhD program. So that's why in my little bio, I try to explain that I just have a master's in peace and conflict studies. Well, so the name is Matthias Yaki once again. Sheikh, good to see you, and it's an honor and privilege to be on this panel with you, right? Unfortunately, you don't know me as a person, but the advantage we have as followers is that religious leaders, we get to know you more than you actually knowing, both those who belong to the Islamic faith and those who are non-Muslims as well. But for the good work you do and for the advocacies you need, some of us follow and we watch keenly from behind. All right, so just to give a little bit about myself, and then I'll speak around the topic of discussion. So I'm a northerner. I'm from the northern part of Nigeria, precisely from the northeastern part of Nigeria, specifically from the Bauchi State. So if you look at the map of Nigeria, Bauchi State, you can call Bauchi State the gates to the northeast, right? If you are coming from Plateau State. But I was born and brought up in a town called Zaria in Kaduna State. So interestingly, I was born in the 80s during one of the religious violence, during the period of some religious violence that was experienced in Kaduna State, precisely this area. So in a way, one, has both heard and witnessed a number of violence that were given religious colorations, both the ones that of a truth were purely based on religious grounds and the ones that are actually not religious, but given a religious coloration. So by identity, by the faith, I'm a Christian, right? Well, the Reverend Father, of course, will speak more, like giving a Christian perspective, and the Sheikh, who is here with us, of course, I know will give Islamic perspective. But I would speak as a peace building practitioner in the field, right? I have 13 years of experience working in the international development space, working directly, with communities on peace building programming, including preventing and mitigating violent extremism. So I have worked, with both Muslims and Christians and done a number of research, including conflict assessment, in fragile communities, especially in northern Nigeria. So like the father rightly mentioned, if you do a bit of research about religious violence or ethno-religious violence in Nigeria, unfortunately, northern Nigeria happened to be the region that has experienced, more of such violence, right? So, speaking from a community perspective, a number of these violent conflicts that have occurred, right? Interestingly, the root causes are not really religious, as the case may be, right? For the few incidents, right, that tend to be from a religious religious point of view, or had religious causes, such as we use the recent violence that happened in 2022, right, in Sokoto State, where a young girl called Deborah, was killed, by an angry mob, where she was alleged to have blasphemed against the Prophet of Islam, Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, right? We had a number of cities, in northern Nigeria where, there were such, protests saying, yeah, she was wrong. So you had a lot of Islamic, both clerics and Muslims, who condemned the act. And sadly, you had, Christians who were like, hey, not so much condoning, well, it seems more like the condoning of what she did, right? Because the voice note and some chat in the WhatsApp group which she belonged to, of which it was alleged that was where she actually blasphemed against the Prophet of Islam, right? So, based on the chat and some of the voice notes that went viral, she was like, she blasphemed, which was really offensive to to the Muslim community, right? So a question one would now want to ask from that point of view is saying, how many Christians or non-Muslims, right? So whether you're a Christian, you're a Buddhist, you're a traditionalist, you don't even believe in God, how many non-Muslims, for example, actually know things in Islam that are considered blasphemous? How many, right? So sometimes, there would even be this assumption that, you are a northerner. Well, if you're a Christian, you're a northerner, you live in the north, you should know that to blaspheme against that speaking negative words or describing or doing whatsoever against the Prophet of Islam, Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, is blasphemy. But the question is, how many people really know? So what this means is that there's a lot of sensitization from religious leaders, right? Both Muslim religious leaders and Christian, religious leaders, to sensitize, non-adherents of their faith about things considered blasphemous. So to say, if you really want to reduce, religious violence, right? So I'm speaking this as a case study to look at, violence that had, religious as an act considered, religious as the root cause, right? So you can imagine. Let me use myself quickly as a case study. Like I said, state of origin, I'm from Bauchi State, not East Nigeria. I was born and brought up in Zaria, so at my nursery, primary, secondary, my first degree in Ahmadu Bello University, Zaria. So the first 22, 23 years of my life was in Zaria. But let me, like the Sheikh would understand what I'm about to say. Sheikh, could you imagine that it wasn't until 2017, because I was born 1987, so 2017, I was 30 years, right? And all my life in the northern part of Nigeria. It wasn't until 2017 when a Muslim friend of mine, whom we happened to attend the same secondary school, a boarding school, I was viewing his WhatsApp status, and he played a short clip, a short video that showed that when Muslims are praying, for example, right, you don't pass in front of them. So rather you put something, in front, just to serve like, a demarcation. So if people want to pass, you can pass the other way. So you don't interrupt the person's prayers. It was not until 2017 that I got to know this. And so the assumption could be that, you're in Northern, you should know this. But unfortunately, I was ignorant of that. So you could imagine if, maybe I have either be it a Christian, a Muslim neighbor, or someone who is praying, and I deliberately go and stand in front of the person is praying, having, his salah prayers, and maybe I'm tapping the person or trying to, just distract the person. Maybe I feel like maybe I'm joking or whatever. Even if it's a deliberate act, naturally we consider it offensive, right? But unfortunately, many non-Muslims are ignorant of this. And so I told this friend of mine, Sadiq, I'm like, Sadiq, do you know I am just knowing this for the first time? And he was like, you don't mean it, my friend. I said, I mean it. So I've just learned something. And he responded, MashaAllah. So the point I'm just trying to say is this, that, in instances where we have, violence that have occurred, that, are being termed as a result of religious causes, when you take a step further and you dig deep, you realize that there is lots of ignorance, on the part of non-adherents of our faith to actually know things that are actually considered blasphemous. So the same thing if you take it, Christians and then Muslims, some Muslims, who might have who do one or two things that some Christians consider, oh, you are blaspheming against the Lord Jesus Christ or against the Holy Spirit, or what you are doing, Christians don't like it, and stuff like that. But how many Muslims are also aware that these things are actually considered, either blasphemous or offensive, to Christians? Now, this, has caused the point about the need to have continuous inter-religious dialogue. So this inter-religious dialogue, will now help, non-adherents of, individual faiths and beliefs, to get to know more about, people's faiths, people's belief, and then there could be more tolerance in the society. Sometimes when I hear people, talk about, oh, there is the need to have tolerance. Oh, let's tolerate one another and what have you. I do say, do you tolerate people out of ignorance? Or do you tolerate people from an informed point of view? Tolerance makes much sense when people actually understand, things. So when you understand people's perspectives, people's belief systems, people's worldview, it helps you to tolerate, it helps you to tolerate them. Not necessarily to convert them, to either be Christians or to make them revert to Islam, but, so that, there's that mutual tolerance, there's that mutual understanding amongst people, and there's mutual respect. Now, if you look at other violence that has taken place, in Nigeria, especially in the northern part of Nigeria, be it in Plateau State, for example. So in many cases, Plateau State, Kaduna State, including my home state, Bauchi State, these are states that have history of reoccurring, violence, ethno-religious violence, but in many cases, religious violence, especially Plateau State. But the more we dig deep, to identify the root causes, we keep seeing that the root causes of this violence are not, so much about religion. Unfortunately, religion keeps falling a victim because it's easy to mobilize sympathy, it's easy to mobilize, supporters using religious identity or coloration. So, for example, in Plateau State, just Plateau State, that has witnessed, series of ethno-religious violence, right? Over the years, what we discover more and more is the fact that the deep root cause of the violence in Plateau State, especially among, the Christian population and the Muslim population, has to do with the question of indigenship, a question of citizenship. And that question has nothing to do with religion, right? So if, for example, Muslims are being killed, because they are trying to claim that they are indigenous, right? They're trying to claim indigenous, they're trying to claim for rights and what have you. The question, on the other hand is, Christians who are not from Plateau State, who probably are Igbos, who are Yoruba, or any other ethnic group, the question is, do they enjoy the rights and privileges of being an indigene of Plateau State? And the answer is no, right? So when you look at this, you now realize that those who give it religious coloration, in many cases, it's because, we are trying to draw sympathy to ourselves, so that we can mobilize force to fight one another. But whereas everyone is suffering from the same, injustice, which is not recognizing me, be it either a Christian or a Muslim, as, an indigene or as a citizen of a particular state like Plateau State. That is one. Two, denial of rights, right? So I can't enjoy the rights and privileges, as a Nigerian citizen first, and secondly, as an indigene of, a particular state. And the excuse in many cases people use is, for example, say in southern Nigeria that they are predominantly Christians, Muslims are denied their rights there, for example. So remove the religious identity, right? Even if it's a Christian, for example, a northern Christian that moves to southern Nigeria, does he or she enjoy rights as a citizen of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, right? And so the same thing, right? When you have Muslims from the south who are up north, right? And especially when Christians up north, say, they are being denied their rights because they are Christians and what have you. The question, on the other hand, you need to ask are Muslims from the southern part of Nigeria who are up north, do they enjoy rights, privileges as citizens, as indigenes of those states, in Nigeria? So this also underscores the need that while on the religious side, we need to encourage, religious dialogue, inter-religious dialogue, to sensitize non-adherents of our respective faiths, of things that are considered, I call it sacrilege, call it blasphemy, and what have you. On the other hand, on the part of governance, there is the need, for equity, for fairness, for justice, for all, right? So when politicians, especially during the build-up to elections, are campaigning, and if I'm a Christian, I go to my fellow Christians to say, hey, you need to mobilize fellow Christians to vote for me. When you vote for me, I will do this for you for the Christian community. Or if I'm a Muslim candidate, I go to the Muslim community and say, hey, mobilize fellow Muslims to vote for me. I will do this and do this, for you, because we are Muslims. The thing, many times these politicians fail to understand is the moment you give, those religious colorations and what have you, you represent a religion. So if you are trying to show favoritism of your faith, above other, then the next question that comes up to both adherents of the faith who are politicians is the God whom we serve, right? Be you a Muslim or a Christian, if we say he's a just God, he's a God of justice, he's a God of fairness, right? He makes the sun to shine both on the Muslim and on the Christian, then as a leader, we should be able to demonstrate that irrespective of if I'm a Muslim or a Christian, I am fair to all. I am just to all. I give all equal opportunities, right? Irrespective of their faith. If as a result of the good that I do, right, and the good that I showcase, it's able to make one love my religion and convert and join my religion, so be it, right? That's on a different level, but not to use religion as a weapon, right, to achieve our selfish interest, to achieve our selfish goal. I mean, I do empathize and sympathize with the Reverend Father, with over the incident where he was kidnapped with a number of persons. Come on, look at the bandits who kidnapped him. Here are the things he mentioned in the background, the kind of things that they do take, the weed they do take, the tramadol, the drug abuse that they take. Does that resemble Islam? Do they represent Islam? Right? So that's pure criminality. That's pure banditry and should be treated as banditry. So it is our role too, as Christians, to identify these issues that look, these are bandits, and should be treated as bandits, criminality, and address underlying root causes. Those underlying root causes that produce such bandits. Did they become bandits as a result of injustice in the society? Did they become bandits as a result of, economic deprivation? Did they become bandits as a result of even ignorance to what, our religion entails, either as a Muslim, either as a Christian, or even as traditionalists, right? So these underlying factors are things that from the community level, we need to address more and more and more. I just finished facilitating a 5 days training this afternoon, right, for the Ministry of Internal Security and Home Affairs of Coimbra State, right, on early warning, early response, and conflict mitigation. And I told them something. I said, look, there is something that the emir, who happened to be, like the paramount chief of Coimbra State, or so to say, he's the chairman of the traditional council of Coimbra State. He is a Muslim. There is something that he does that I feel has contributed to the significantly to the peaceful coexistence being enjoyed in Coimbra State, as an example. So Coimbra State in recent years, in fact for more than 1 year, just violence. Now, funny enough is that the area of Coimbra State, right, part of his council members, he has both Muslims and Christians. So indigenous, non-indigenous group, so groups that are not considered non-indigenous for in Coimbra State, right? Who happen to either be from the Igbo extraction, Yoruba extraction, even religious identity, happen to be Christians and what have you. Their community leaders, or like their chiefs, so to say, they are members of his council. That every month, he sits with them, to be part of decision-making process of the Emirates and what have you. Interestingly, it wasn't the emir of Coimbra State that told us this. It was non-indigenous groups, both Christians and Muslims, especially more of the Christian non-indigenous groups, that were telling us this, that look, we are part of the traditional council of Gombe State, traditional council of Gombe Emirates Council, right? And so where there are concerns, they could take it to the Emirates, and the Emirates at their own level try to address, such. So such initiatives like this, we need to see them continue, across other states in Nigeria, including southern Nigeria. So what it means is that if there are, for example, northern ethnic groups who are in the south, right, and those northerners who are in the south by religious identity happen to be Muslims, they shouldn't feel that they are far away from home. They should feel accepted. They should feel loved. They should feel being included, be it in traditional councils, be it even in religious councils, so that where they have, concerns, fears, grievances, it's easy to, communicate such so that it could be addressed. So by and large, I'm just trying to say here that it's a collective effort, right? It's a collective effort, but more and more from the religious leaders, right? We need to see more of this inter-religious dialogue taking place at their level, because just like what I told the sheikh, right? The sheikh doesn't know me as a person, but he's a religious leader who is up there, right? So we watch and see things that they do. So the more we see our religious leaders of the different faiths, Islam, Christianity, including traditional, religious leaders coming together to discuss, issues, clarify gray area, addressing fear and concerns about non-adherence of our faith, the more and the better for us. Thank you so much. I stop here.
Thank you, Matthias. Now I move to Nuruddin. Please, it's your time. And thanks for coming.
I'll start by first saying thank you to everyone for their patience. Listening to three Nigerians is not easy. We control the floor like nobody else. That's why we are Nigeria. I will try and work within the time given. One of the advantages of speaking last is everybody seems to have said what you would have wanted to say, but then you still seem to have things to say. And so what I'll try and do is repeat some things that I think were critical from the various presenters, Professor Maria, Father Stephen, and Mr. Matthias. But hopefully I would like to add a few metaphors that would probably simplify without making it too simplistic. For Nigeria, we have different forms of violent extremism. There's Boko Haram, which is generally religious from one perspective, in that they believe it's religious. Others may say they're just fighting for power using religion, instrumentalizing religion. We do have conflicts between Muslims and Christians, but has already been said very beautifully by Mr. Matthias, when we look more closely at these challenges, they seem to be minority-majority problems, because the community that is Muslim happens to also be a minority in that part where there's a conflict, happens to have another ethnicity, happen to be migrants or what you call settlers, and happen to control the economy of the area where they are actually visitors. And you'll find the same thing with various minorities. And it's up to you. Do you want to say it's a majority-minority conflict, or do you want to say it's a Muslim-Christian conflict, or do you want to say it's an indigent settler conflict? After years of getting religious leaders to come and solve the problem, and you find it's not being solved, then maybe it's not religious. And this is the problem of the knee-jerk reaction to not diagnosing. And imagine how many years since I was in primary school, people said religious problem in Jos, religious problem in the Plateau State area. It's when we got to, after university, people started saying, actually, it's an ethnic issue. And a lot of bigotry comes into framing conflicts. And we'll come back into that a bit. Another form of conflict we have is what you saw, banditry, kidnapping for ransom. The kidnappers may be Muslim, the kidnappers may be Christian, but kidnapping is not done as a religious instrument. Yes, Boko Haram did kidnapping for ransom, and that was a source of income to the terrorist organization. But this is not Muslim versus Christian, because over 90% of the victims of Boko Haram were Muslims. Most of their activities were in Muslim majority areas in the northeastern part of the country. They destroyed mosques, they destroyed churches. Basically, whatever was a soft target, they killed pastors, they killed imams. In our network, they have killed over 64 imams that we know who spoke against them, a little like Al-Shabaab in Somalia. The moment you even mention Al-Shabaab on the pulpit, you are just asking for death from the group. Violent extremism is not new, and I'll focus on the religious one. So basically, the Boko Haram type of violent extremism, which shares a lot in common with ISIS, Al-Qaeda, Al-Shabaab, of the various places. For violent extremism, a lot of it, actually nearly any conflict, is like a pothole, potholes on roads. If you leave them alone, they will grow, and you will have more potholes. Potholes look the same nearly everywhere in the world, but we don't have what you call a global strategy for dealing with potholes. Why? Because potholes are very local when it comes to their causes. There you think locally and act locally, not think globally. No, don't come with, well, globally, this is what I found in that country was the cause of their extremism, therefore, that's what's here. You will prolong the suffering, you will misdiagnose, and you will spend a lot of money. It's a waste of energy. Wrong diagnosis ends in wrong prescription. Potholes can be caused by heavy vehicles. It can be caused by low-quality asphalt. It can be caused by poor underlying soil, soft soils under. It could be caused by excessive heat. It could be caused by excessive cold and frost that cracks the asphalt. So just because there's a pothole, and I'm saying this as students who are going into international relations and this, don't think globally and then want to act locally. When you go to interview the people close to the pothole or close to the conflict, they usually tell you the grievances. From a distance, it looks very clear. Oh, it's a religious problem again. When you get closer, you realize, as a general rule, ideology without grievance does not produce movement. Ideology without grievance does not produce movement. It's very difficult to find a violent extremist ideology that don't have a human rights complaint. So when you look in the Americas, most of them are Christians, Catholics. What was their response to oppression? It was to come up with a liberation theology where religion was going to be a tool for freeing themselves. Were there some extremists among them? Yes. But we don't, you can empathize with the pain, you can empathize with the cause, you can disagree with the methods. The civil rights movement in America was taken over with Martin Luther King and co. by Baptists, by Christians. And I think it is because the church held on to that methodology that it didn't go terrorist. So when it is still under good control, things go fine. So religion has always been used as a tool for liberation, but you can't liberate with a theology if there's nothing to liberate from. There has to be a grievance, a pain on the ground that is understood. So it's usually a human rights abuse, it's a social injustice that needs to be dealt with. Usually problems start by stereotyping the other, and when you leave the stereotyping to carry on, it gradually evolves into prejudice. If you do nothing about it, it evolves into discrimination. If you do nothing about it, it evolves into injustice. And then the laws of karma start, and somebody wants to say enough is enough. and it then leads to violence. One of the problems in religious communities is when orthodoxy becomes stagnant and so close to political powers that they don't speak for the conscience of the majority. When religious organizations do not say anything wrong with government injustice, then it is tempting for a little group to break off, call it heretical, call it whatever you want, to try and fix what the majority is not dealing with. But they will use religion to pull more people to their cause and view themselves as we are actually the representatives of God's justice or God's compassion for the poor or for the victims. And so a lot of people who join these groups join because they are also victims or social trauma, secondary trauma, sorry. Their brothers were victims, their sisters were victims. If you look at the studies from the UNDP, United Nations Development Program, they have a study, Journey to Extremism in Africa. And in the executive summary, just page 5, they actually find that up to 71% of violent extremists that are religious are actually in the movement for vengeance. 71. It's vengeance. So the need to not, think that it's clear from a distance without coming closer and finding out what really caused this problem. One of the problems is our complication bias. So the tendency is to think that other people's problems are very straightforward and understandable, whereas the problems in Portugal or the problems in France or the problem in my country are very complicated, not easy to understand. I don't think there's a more complicated country like Nigeria. To look at any problem and think it is simple and that it's just animalistic, just third world behavior that is resulting in it would be a big mistake and an injustice to the victims that we actually would like to help solve. One of the problems is every religion, every community, ethnic, nationalist, believes that they have wolves in sheep's clothing. Okay. Every community has those people who they are part of you, but they undermine. If you're looking for somebody who has stolen millions from Nigeria, it's a Nigerian. I'm not saying there's nobody else, but if you're looking, go to any city and find out who are the majority of people in the prisons in that community. It's the local people that are the majority in their own prisons. But yet they would like to say the problem is somebody else. They say when you point to a problem, 3 fingers are pointing to you, and probably those 3 are telling the truth. It's just that it's easy for me as a Muslim to recognize the wolf in sheep's clothing when he's a Muslim. But if I don't know enough about Christianity and I have a lot of stereotypes about Christianity, then when anybody does something, it's easy to say, oh, that's Christianity. So we complicate our own, we simplify the other. When our people do something wrong, the tendency is to find a very complicated answer and say, it's just like, if I'm late, why am I late? Well, circumstances beyond my control. Why are you late? You just misbehavior. You don't respect people. We make our own justified, but we give no excuses for the others. That makes it difficult for interfaith relations to empathize with any particular conflict. And this, I think, underscores the point that Mr. Matthias was making of the need to improve interfaith understanding. Because then when somebody behaves in a wrong way, I know that's not a Christian. I know what Christians are like. I know what Christianity teaches. And even though I'm not a Christian, I'm not a Jew, I'm not a Hindu, I know that's not how the religion teaches them to behave. It's easier for me to notice the wolf in sheep's clothing in the other flock. Even when we look at interfaith conflicts, wherever we see them, one thing you notice is it's a clash between the 2 far rights. The Muslims have their own far right, just as the Christians have their own radicals and far right. In the universities, the Muslims and Christians in Nigeria are living peacefully. In the markets, everything fine. In the hospitals, everything fine. In the government offices, in the schools, everything's going fine. So where's the problem? It's one radical extreme right agitating the other. But this agitation of extremism can behave like a virus. It is contagious. If it is not handled, the number of people who are angry continue to increase in numbers. People who initially just felt prejudice start feeling discriminated, start feeling unjustly treated. Now they start finding their brother has been arrested, their cousin has been killed. People who, no problem before, but gradually they find the pain and suffering is getting closer and they start feeling victimized. Religion is used because it is credible. In most societies, if somebody wants to mobilize people, religion is a very powerful mobilizer in some communities, and everybody wants to use religion to mobilize. Politicians want it for votes. Some religious leaders are very tribal, and they would like to use religion for racial purposes. In the histories of the world, religion has been used to justify slavery. Religion has been used to bring an end to slavery. Religion has been used to persecute Jews or to liberate, to persecute another religion or to liberate them. It's been used for racial purposes against blacks, but blacks have also used religion for liberating themselves. So religion can do many things. The question is who is in control and who is handling the narratives. The same metal and wood and wire and a spring that could be used to produce some work of art could also be used to make a mousetrap. People, you can, just change the shape. How you interpret text hermeneutically, drop the context. You can say anything to justify what you want and claim it is religion, and especially if you have charisma. So one challenge is that of framing, which has already been mentioned. If my community has been hostile to this community, I would explain it as self-defense. I would explain it's political, it's economic. But if their community is hostile to mine, theirs is religious. So the victim usually tries to make it look really practical if it is their communities. But if I'm the victim, then I'll always say the other side is religious. And that gets me more compassion from others. It gets me more finance. The West is ready. Many countries and people belonging to one religion are ready to pump resources into a community. If you say it's Muslims being persecuted there, Muslim countries would want to come and support. If you say Christians are being persecuted there, Christian countries would want to come and support. And who doesn't want more money? So unfortunately, many of us who would really want peace are quick to listen to some religious scholars who are bigoted and who have interests. They're human beings. And fortunately, very fortunately, we always have those who are honestly fair and want the problem solved. But we also have the wolf in sheep's clothing, who they benefit, unfortunately, from the problem persisting. I'll end, because of time, ways moving forward. It is important, I think, for interfaith dialogues to move beyond harmony building to addressing the actual social challenges. To be ready to be critical of the government, because most politicians would rather say it's a religious problem than to say it's a political problem or it's a resource problem, because then it's their responsibility. And they'd rather not do anything with problematics or wicked problems that are really complicated. So, unfortunately, some religious scholars keep thinking it's religious because they've been told it's religious by the politician who's supposed to know better, without real studies. Fortunately, there are a number of civil society organizations and NGOs that have actually studied each of these conflicts carefully to show what's really going on. Something we found very useful has been training of trainers. Conflicts like Boko Haram are done by the far right, if I use that metaphor, of Muslims. If you want to get to the far right, you need people on the right. because they can get to the slightly far right, to the far right, to the far, far right. So you do need intra-faith bridge building to deal with the people who create an interfaith conflict. The Christians need to build bridges with their own far right. Because the Christian far right doesn't listen to any Muslim. The Muslim far right doesn't listen to any Christian. Interfaith dialogue will not stop the conflict by the extremes, because the extremes only listen to their own people. And they only listen to the people who are also more to the right and can empathize with them. So in conclusion, the methods we have found most effective for both dealing with violent extremism of the intrafaith type like Boko Haram or the interfaith has actually been to focus on intrafaith bridge building. As you are building bridges, people want to burn those bridges. One thing we found has been to intellectually vaccinate imams, religious leaders, to be able to make it more difficult for people to recruit young people into extremism. Because the moment the moment they have shifted to the other side, they stop listening to you, and it actually becomes more dangerous trying to engage. I'll stop there because I know there's time for discussions.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We will not be much longer, but we will leave the people that are with us just to put questions to whoever you want. Let's do like this. So, who wants to put a question? You.
If it's okay. From your personal experiencing training people to communicate with other with people from other religions, what do you think makes a good communicator, and what is the challenges that that you face generally?
So one challenge I find in communication is just a human thing of differentiated learning. People learn in different ways. Some people enjoy hearing. Some people prefer reading. Some people would like to see action. Some people would like case studies being analyzed. Some people like stories and metaphors. I tend to like all of them. So that's, I think, been helpful for me. But I find metaphors very useful because they can, you can use a metaphor for students, you can use it for lecturers, you can use it for leaders, and each one, because of their exposure, can go deeper than your own presentation. Another thing has been identifying what I call common equations. Because the moment you start talking to other religious leaders, when you're ignorant about their pain and their challenges, the tendency is you present. So I, as a Muslim, would, if I'm not careful, would present things in such a way that they subliminally think I am saying I'm a victim and you're the perpetrator, when they're also victims of the same thing and structure that I'm complaining about. And so something I've found useful because it makes me listen to another person. It starts to make my blood rush and ego defensiveness when you're framing me as your problem. So I think one way to bypass that pain, however legitimate it may be, is to speak and get vocabulary that doesn't put it as if you're accusing the other side. There's a biblical verse where it says all have sinned and have fallen short of the glory of God. So I think in a similar sense for, don't speak as if your community is the community of angels and they're the devils. To recognize that most of the problem in both sides are their wolves in sheep's clothing and your wolves in sheep's clothing, and let those who really care get together. So it's not us versus you. It is us who want to solve the problem versus those who seem to be benefiting from the problem or at least contributing to it. What I find also has helped has been when people are more loyal to the values they hold in common, like fairness and justice, than to the identity of the group. I find many religious and political leaders a little like, we call them flags back at home. So they ask, which direction does the flag blow the wind? I said, but the flag does not blow the wind. It looks as if it's blowing the wind, but it's not blowing the wind. It's the wind that is blowing the flag. And many leaders like to see which direction the wind is blowing, and then they rise in that direction. So they look like leaders, but they're actually responding to the real leaders who are the wind blowers within their groups. And so I think it's trying to get more leaders to be leaders and influence their groups, as opposed to just representing the groups, even when the group is moving in the wrong direction. So, because I think from a non-verbal communication point of view, those type of leaders, like some of those you've invited, Matthias, Stephen, Father Stephen, and there are quite a number of others, but many are so hurt by what happened to their communities that they talk as if they are victims and the other is the perpetrator. So I think that being fair makes people like me more open to listening. And I think if religious leaders are more fair in being critical of their communities as they are of the others, then others become more open to those shared values of justice, the common good. Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So I'm Philippe Rosé, I'm a PhD student. I would like to ask you something, and which should not be taken as provocation. I just say, if you recognize the existence of secularism, don't you think there is a different degree of development, secularism, in different parts of the society or even in different countries, and if this does have an impact in your opinion or not? Thank you.
Number one, I think mainstream Islam, as I have understood it, has recognized the secular. If by secular we mean decisions made by ordinary people on logical grounds, not a theocracy. Mainstream Islam, which is Sunni, has not advocated for a theocracy. The Shia Muslims have recognized a theocracy. The structure of the Sunni, so if you say the main groups of Muslims are the Sunni, which is approximately 85-90%, and the other ones are about 10-15%, the Sunni structure is more like a Protestant structure. And who becomes a religious leader is more a survival of the fittest. Natural selection, you gradually are respected by other scholars, and gradually they say you're a scholar. Whereas in the Shia group, it's more like a Catholic structure where you climb and, they recognize you when you get to a particular level. In the Sunni, subjects that are secular, traffic laws, have never been the territory of scholars. They don't even comment about it. Subjects like defense and agriculture and healthcare, so what you call the secular subjects, have not been the concern of religious leaders unless there's an ethical issue, and so the role, and you would find this in most religions, most clergy have historically been the ethical boards of communities. So both from the side of both right and wrong, but also regarding pushing for justice, but also pushing for reconciliation. Throughout most history, if anybody is to publicly ask people to be forgiving, you can guess he's a religious person. I think as religious institutions have abused their powers, it has made sense. And as the secular aspects of life, secular meaning the non-religious strictly, not anti-religion or atheistic. So I think as society has become much more complicated, and knowledge has increased, it's not just anybody who learns to be a doctor from their father, as it was in the past, and you need specialization. And so gradually there's been more specialization for who's going to be an engineer, who's going to be in agriculture, who's going to be in politics, defense, and what you call the secular subjects, and the religious. But what I think some secular societies have done and continue to do, and we have this in Nigeria, is to have, and I think it's part of democratic process, that before any new law or policy is put forward, there's a public hearing where stakeholders, civil society organizations, faith-based organizations get to hear what's coming up, debate it, and decide whether to support it or not. And I think that's a very good development. But at the same time, while it is important to separate the roles of the clergy from the more secular roles of the state, for Sunni Islam, yeah, but the people who are there are still people who have a faith and who would make laws that don't go contrary to the faith. What has been important is to ensure these have been documented. And I think an adaptation we find, not just in Islam, even in Christianity, the Catholic Church, the Vatican II documents, there was the Nostra Aetate, there was the encyclical Populorum Progressio, another document about the need for the common good and shared values. So what we find is even the religious being more accommodating of the secular, so as to move away from a theocracy, but also to move away from secularism that is anti-religion. Yeah. So what you find in some places is not a division between the church and state, but an oppression of the church by the state, just as in the past you'd have oppression of the church or the mosque by the the other way around. Yeah. So I think so long as societies stay open to discussions and make sure they don't forget the education of their religious leaders, we won't have problems. Where we are having problems in, say, my area, northern Nigeria, is the government recognizes religious leaders are very influential, but doesn't care about their education. Because they are popular, they would want the religious leaders to say something good about their political party. They would pay for the ticket of this religious leader to go for Hajj, just basically gaining support. But they unfortunately don't care too much about getting these religious leaders exposed. And so when we look at vaccine hesitancy and the position of some religious leaders, you needed other religious leaders to tell these religious leaders, like, when did you become an authority on vaccines that you're going to allow some social media video to become more credible than the whole of the National Disease Control Agency or World Health Organization? When we try to put a minimum age for marriage in Nigeria, it's been a struggle. Why? Because some say well, there's no minimum age in the Quran, there's no minimum age, so where is this law coming from? Yeah, but even in the Quran and Hadith, there's no minimum age for opening a bank account. There's no minimum age for driving a car. But that seems to be non-controversial. Why is a minimum age for marriage controversial when early marriage does create problems for the girl, for children, for families, etc.? So sometimes I think there's need, as society is progressing, to help greater exposure of the religious leaders. Go and learn more in Malaysia, go and learn more in Morocco, go and learn more in other countries, and that helps them make sure religion doesn't keep becoming an obstacle, but instead actually supports and creates mobilization in supporting good policies. Hope that answers. You're welcome.
Also, first of all, let me thank you for your words. I learned a lot today. And my question, and you just a little bit touched upon the subject, the use of social media and the confirmation bias, and all the algorithms today point you towards confirmation bias, and you always get bombarded with what you already started to believe. How can we break this cycle, knowing that we cannot oblige the major internet companies to force them algorithms to break that cycle? So how can we work in a way that we can at least make a barrier on this confirmation bias and try to break this continuous cycle of reinforcing what we see?
I think this is it's a huge challenge, very important question. I'm not sure I have answers. What the algorithms seem to do is when you go online, they even start to ask you, so you want to subscribe to a news channel. What news do you want to listen to? And you end up picking what you're interested in. So you're not exposed to conflicting ideas. The whole idea of academia is that freedom to hear, give freedom of expression for people to say things you've never heard before, to challenge you. The algorithms, instead of challenging you, give what doesn't challenge you and what you already like or like a bit, not what you don't like. And so I think a lot of young people, a lot of people are growing in a world where you are living more and more in an echo chamber, where you become actually like an intellectual ghetto. You just are surrounded by people like you, who think like you, who like what you like and prefer your opinion and tell you you're right. And I mean, we look at social media. Who likes somebody saying they don't like? No, you like whatever people like. So you tend to become more like a flag, even in what are you going to say. You would like to say things that create more likes. I think we're losing, it's the title of a book, we're losing the courage to be disliked. Yeah, the courage to be disliked. That's actually the name of the book, The Courage to be Disliked. But that's really where growth takes place. That's where you get to know, am I right or am I wrong? And so I think old things are still important. Get to meet real life people and not just whatever social media presents. If anybody tells you somebody is supposed to be your enemy, I think it's go and meet them and you realize they're the best friend you never knew you had. Some of my best friends are from diverse countries and diverse faiths, and some with no faiths at all. But wonderful people. You can talk about anything with them. And I'm glad I got to know some of these people before social media. And so that's one. I think go and meet people. The other thing is travel. Yeah, travel. When you go and see how intelligent people are and things they do that you never thought of in your society, I think it's enough to really challenge you. What we found is a lot of people who, interesting studies in the States about positions on the race spectrum from the far right to others, especially white supremacists. And one of the biggest things that broke their stereotypes and what they saw was actually sitting and talking with the other person and just tell me your life. And then you realize you live just like me, and the same struggles of transport and same struggles of tax, and and I think that recognition of people as just being people like you is really good. We've become very, they say news is only bad news. In journalism, they say if it bleeds, it leads. They need to have something bad to make a headline. It's difficult for good news to make a headline. And I think recognizing that is useful in immunizing ourselves from believing that the bad news is so much that the world must be bad. So there's a book, I think it came out last year, by, what's his name? It's called Humankind, A Hopeful History. Really looking at where did we get this whole perception of we're good, everything else is bad, and we should be careful about others and other tribes and other everything. So I think travel, meeting people, very useful. And then the normal critical thinking tools. I think if as teachers we really challenge our students. I was speaking with Professor Fernando about how his students respond to how he teaches, and I'm sure there are others. But where you really challenge, that's what university is for, to help you learn how to learn. It's not to end up here, it's to move into the world, but be more objective. There's some questions we train imams in, that whatever you hear, what does it mean? Where do you get your information from? How do you know it's true? Is there corroborating evidence? Just anything that is important. What does it mean? Where do you get that information? Is he an authority? Because you hear on COVID, on this, on that, like who's speaking? I don't know, but he seemed to wear a lab coat. Like suddenly that makes him a professor of healthcare and immunology or virology. So yeah, what do you mean? And how does that go with what we know? Where do you get your information from? What's the authority? How do you know it's true? What's the evidence? And is it corroborated? It's just that fluke, anecdotal thing, or so I think these help. But it's a big challenge to handle the echo chambers that are growing. And AI is becoming better at giving you what you really want and really customizing your news, your WhatsApp, your TikToks, your everything. It's a bit scary.
Nuruddin, Matthias and Stephen, feel free to intervene, please. As you are in the ecran, it is sometimes it is very easy to forget that you are there. So, but please feel free. I would just like to comment. We have more 15 minutes. What Nuruddin now say, it's exactly what the new schools of marketing are saying. Instead of that pyramid of there is a vision, a mission, objectives, targets, etc. No. You have to ask 3 questions. Why, how, and what? When you say why, and the interesting point is that who are the guys in the political arena that more quickly learn that? The far right. They come to the heart and to the soul of people, are asking the whys, the how did they treat you, how do you live, how this is, and not beginning by what. That's very interesting, and you remind me that's a comment. That's a comment. But please, Matthias and Joseph, would you like to intervene, please? Whatever you may have forgotten, whatever you may have listened, please feel free, and same to you. Oh, there is one. Okay, come on. There is one question, probably.
Hi, My name is Fernanda Alves. I'm a guest professor here at FEUC as well, International Relations. First of all, thank you so much for your explanation. And I would like to ask a question that is connected to building bridges that you mentioned before. So, in general, during conflicts, moderate voices striving to build those bridges are often the first to face persecution, right? Or even extermination due to their role within the community. So, how can interfaith dialogue effectively support and protect these voices, especially in those environments dominated by polarized narratives? This, for example, victim perpetrator binary, right? So, what approaches can help to ensure their contribution to conflict resolution? Because those people are also afraid, right? They could be afraid of retaliation, of persecution. So, do you have any experience with those cases? And what strategies can be employed to protect those voices? Thank you.
Number one, when violence has broken out, it's very dangerous to build bridges. Because you've already got an us and a them, and anybody here wanting to speak on behalf of them is viewed as a sellout, loyalty is questioned. So the best time to build bridges is in the dry season, not in the flooding season. To use that metaphor. When it comes to building bridges, what we notice with many bridges is that they are bridges between the leadership of this community and the leadership of the other community. These are not people who are direct victims of any perpetrations. So while it is good to have those bridges, every time the Pope visits countries that Christians are persecuted, whether it's India, whether it's a Muslim country, wherever it is, persecution goes down. Because the fact that this religious leader is hosted by another religious leader and that community, that bridge is useful because it sends a signal. What we found most useful is building bridges between, on the grassroots level, between the two communities. So say it's Nigeria, we have a president of the Christian Association of Nigeria, we have a sultan representing the Muslims. That bridge is useful, but that's not the bridge that is causing the conflict, nor does it stop the conflict. The conflict is a very local thing. So what we need is local bridge building. So where there's tension, what we try to do is build bridges between the local Muslim leadership and the local Christian leadership. It starts with a harmony bridge building. They know each other. There's tension. Usually it has not turned to violence because interfaith dialogue is better for prevention than for cure. Cure you now need mediation as opposed to, which is also useful. But if you're going to build bridges, just like in physical building of bridges, you need a solid foundation on this side of the bank that is going to build a bridge and another solid foundation on the other side, and they gradually come together. What does this mean, a foundation here? The bridge has to be owned by the community, not by some foreigners or an international NGO. And what that means is you identify people who believe bridge building is going to be progressive, it is good for all of us. You get those who believe the same thing there. So I'll just focus on one side now. And these group are the ones we usually invite for training programs. So we will get, for example, 20 to 25 imams from this community. We'll take them through some trainings in how to handle bridge burning arguments, how to respond to those who will criticize them and to those who will question their loyalty. But that's not enough, because after you've trained these people, what you want is for the community to be behind them. So what these 25 people will do is they will identify their potential critics. They will identify their top students and take them through a number of training programs so that you started with 25, but you end with about 150, 200 of the most important religious voices in that community all on board. And the Christians are training their own people from the Christian community. Then you bring them together for interfaith dialogue that is harmony building. Don't discuss any of the grievances yet. Let them establish a relationship, establish trust, and then you bring issue dose by dose. Don't overdose. So just like with medicine, it's good, but too much can kill. And they agree what are the issues we would want to discuss. What are the issues you would want to discuss? What do you like about that community? What do you like about that community? And that humanizes the relationship. So once they can do that, training of trainers, step-down training, local advocacy, and this foundation of the bridge belongs to the community, then there's a greater chance it will be difficult for somebody from that community to burn the bridge. They are ready to collaborate in the bridge building. There we have found sustainable bridges. But you will find, therefore, the interfaith work, 90% of it is intra-faith. Yeah, it's within and getting them all on board. Then otherwise you have a bridge going nowhere. It's good for pictures. They attend the same thing and it goes, but it's not preventing anything. Those are just my thoughts. I don't know.
Yes, but maybe Father, what do you think about bridges?
Well, talking about building bridges, first of all, thank you, Nuruddin, for those beautiful analyses. I gave an example of those two imams, Imam Ashafa and Pastor James Wee, which for me are a very practical example of building bridges. They have lived across different communities, perpetrating violence in the past, and they have seen the after effect of violence, and they have decided to build bridges by their network of interfaith mediation. And I perfectly agree with my brother who said it's difficult to build bridges when it has already collapsed. It has to be when things are normal. That is where we begin to build bridges. And I feel ashamed, for example, after my incidents, one of the things I find difficult to understand was that I had lots of Muslim friends who have nothing to do with the violence in Nigeria, who have nothing to do with the terrorism in Boko Haram. But it doesn't take away from the fact that some of those who are doing what they are doing are being influenced by the wrong influence of the teachings of the Quran. Very, very sad. So I take solace in the fact that I have a very good relationship with my Muslim friends in Sunni. That is what consoled me. And I don't look at the negativity that is in the society. I focus on those positive aspects that strengthens community relationship. And somebody asked a question about how do you protect those moderate voices who want to build bridges. And I think my brother answered brilliantly. If any voice is moderate in that sense, you can only do more when an atmosphere is created. But when the bridge has collapsed, in all fairness, and that is why we keep going back and forth. It looks as if we're not making progress, because in some instances, those bridges have actually collapsed. So we just need a very strong force to be able to help us build the bridge first of all, before we can begin to strengthen the rapport, the friendship that exists between us. One of the people that have really supported my advocacy, my release, or those who spoke more when I was captive were actually my Muslim friends. So it was very difficult to even, to couch it in a very religious motivated action, because those who advocated for my freedom were mostly some of my Muslim friends. So I think we need more of those kind of bridges when things are calm, not when things have already collapsed.
Nice. Matthias, do you want to add something? Please.
You say?
Matthias, whether you had anything to add? Go ahead.
Yes, please. Yes, please. Just quickly. I mean, both Sheikh Lemu and Father Stephen have spoken brilliantly about it. But then, just also speaking, from the community perspective now, right? So one way, speaking first about protecting the moderate voices now, right, is the moderate voices. One way to protect yourself, or the moderate voices would protect themselves first, especially in the outbreak of violent conflict, is for such voices not to be quick to reach out, right, to the other conflicting lines. Because at that point, trust has been broken, right? Trust has been broken. And so there's the tendency to view a moderate voice as, you're a sellout and what have you. So at that point, the moderate voice needs to speak within his own fold, right? Trying to calm down. And even when, the violence is also coming to them, from their own fold, is to help their own fold see things from a different perspective. As hurting as it may be, try to see things from a different perspective. That's one. Secondly, this is where the power of the media comes in. Because you wouldn't want to go directly, across the divide where you could be easily lynched or attacked, right? But you could use the media, be it any of your social media platform, where you could call for calm, you could call for peace, you could call for understanding, and so that at that point, you are shielding yourself, from physical attack. Yes, I mean you will still be attacked one way or the other, especially maybe through online platforms, be it on comments in your Facebook page or what have you, those on your own side looking at you as sellouts. But one thing is this: if you remain constant, surely people would definitely listen to you. Thank you, and over.
If I may add a little point there, there's what some people call insider mediators or omnipartial mediators. That is, there are people in another religious group or another ethnic group that hold the same values as you. If you ask that Christian, are you a Christian? Yes. But when it comes to justice, he really doesn't care whether you're a Christian or Muslim. He's just a really just human being. Here, you'll find the same thing. The best bridges are built by these people. The problem is, because these are the best at intra-faith side, and he's the best at influencing his own. The problem is, if you only have one on the other side, don't try to build bridges. Use him to increase their numbers. Yeah. Because the moment he tries to build bridges and he is viewed as a sellout, you've used your last straw. A bridge between two communities is made by the community, not by somebody who is too risky. So what we find is, if in a community there's only one person who really wants peace, or just two of them, we need 100. How do we get 100? So instead of building the bridges with the two people you have, use the two people you have to identify others who can agree to be insider mediators. And then you get this group to build. But a lone ranger, in fact, that's one of the problems we notice when we invite people to come for training. So you invite one person from that community, one person from that community, one, and fine, we've got a training of 25, 50. At the end, when you send him back, he's afraid to do anything. He's afraid to talk against Boko Haram. He's afraid to say anything that is different, especially if he knows he's got some Boko Haram sympathizers in his community. He's like a lone ranger. He's alone and he's afraid for his life. He's afraid for his own standing in the community. What we find most useful is, don't bring one from here, one from here. Bring 20 from here, bring 20 from the same community. Then when they go back, all right, how can we move from 20 to 100? Then even if you finished your training and you never go back to the community, you've got people who are enough to blow the wind in a direction that will build bridges. And so even if you say we have no more money for trainings, no problem. So long as these people are there, they will moderate, they will mediate. You build their capacity and they're for life. Yeah.
Thank you.
I wanted to ask the state's role in this bridge building, because it's like the grassroots and all that. But I know there are people also in the state who also have influence and could help, not faster, but could help in building bridges and could help mitigate this violence like ongoing. So what about the state's role in all these things?
So the role of the state when it comes to bridge building depends on the conflict. So with Boko Haram problem, the state is actually viewed as the perpetrator, because most Boko Haram people who were killed by the state. It's in movies you can kill 1,000 people and then say the end. In real life, you don't kill 1,000, 2,000, and you think they don't have relatives who are ready to die for them. And I think this is a problem with military interventions. When it is thought the military will solve a problem, everywhere you go, from just anywhere, think about it. Where has military gone in to solve the problem and it all operated as they thought? Well, we'll shoot the people and that's enough and we'll go and everything will work. So when we still are, but when we started dealing with Boko Haram recruitment, so one of the things the institute I work with focuses on is encountering recruitment into Boko Haram. So it's not military, it is building resilience within the community through community leaders and their students to make it very difficult for Boko Haram to recruit its new leadership. So we were also interested in countering the succession planning of the Boko Haram organization, so that if it's going to last for 5, 10 years, 15 years, let it not have a next generation of leaders. If people who are sympathizers, we said ideology without grievance doesn't produce movement. So they have their grievances and why they are angry with the government. If you bring a government official to a program where you want to build resilience, you have already said you're with the government. They view you, it's actually dangerous for you to want government. We don't want government anywhere near anything we do. Government is bad news for us. It's a kiss of death to get money from the government, to be seen with government, it's a very quiet, call it covert, very quiet activity of religious leaders educating others and cascading from the right to the far right. With some other activities, like interfaith bridge building, the politicians like it. They become more popular. If you have Muslims and Christians wanting to build bridges, the politician knows he has nothing to fear because he likes Muslim voters and Christian voters. He is more ready to attend that program than if he was invited by only Muslims, especially if there's a majority Christian community there. But if you say Muslims and Christians are inviting him, he comes. And if he can help fund it and make it bigger, then all the better. So government in Nigeria supports what is called NIREC, the Nigerian Inter-Religious Council. It's supported by the government. And they have branches down to the state level, down to the local government levels. They are more active in some states than in other states. But when it comes to the role of government, sometimes you want government, sometimes you don't want government. So it's what's the problem? And then you ask yourself from a track 1, track 2, track 3 level, do you want track 1 and government to be part of this? Does it help? Or is the grievance that created the interfaith problem, so like indigent settler problems, you want government to be there because that's where the government gets to hear they are the problem because they're not recognizing the citizenship of people just because they are migrants from here to there. So in some places, you definitely want government, and sometimes the government does not want to attend. because you're putting a responsibility on them. So they are important, but how important are they is tied to what's the conflict analysis and whether they are stakeholders that are useful or not. Yeah. But sometimes it's good to put them in the picture. Otherwise, they come and harass you. So you have to play politics with the politicians too. Thank you.
Oh, can you just listen, please?
So just about the inter-religious communication. Inter-religious, yes. I would like to ask, are they international organizations that will be building those bridges or more local associations? Because as you said, it shouldn't be the government to do so because they don't want to be involved, to be honest. That's the question.
No Muslim community wants to be viewed as heretical and strange. And so when it came to Afghanistan, Taliban in power, you had Qatar playing an important role in trying to get scholars from other countries to speak to Taliban leadership. Because the Taliban didn't want to be isolated. Unfortunately, a lot of politics came in and just too many other interests. So it wasn't as simple as it's just religious. In some of the problems, so take Boko Haram. Boko Haram doesn't listen. Okay, they have factions. They don't listen to anybody other than ISIS. So the ISWAP, which is the Islamic State of the West African province, was this side's faction of ISIS. So they listen to ISIS. But ISIS listens to nobody. There's no Muslim scholar anywhere in the world you would want to bring to speak to ISIS and they would listen. So some groups have broken away. If you got Joseph Kony of the Uganda Lord's Redemption Army, which Christian are you going to bring for him to listen to? Like nobody. And they would kidnap, they would rape, they would do all the atrocities, etc. So what you have with some extremist groups is there's nobody that speaks to them that they would listen to. So with Boko Haram, it even is very dangerous for any scholar I know in Nigeria to want to speak to them. They've killed a lot of them. Some of the very prominent ones who were telling them you are wrong, this is not what Islam teaches, they killed them. So when you cannot speak to Boko Haram to tell them they are wrong, what else can you do? You can look at the community where they recruit people to join them, and you can intellectually vaccinate that. That's safer, and in the long run, vaccination is not killing the disease. It just makes the disease no more harmful because people no more believe what they are saying, people no more get recruited. Having said that, about 71% of recruitment is not because of religion. It's because of human rights abuses. And so even if the religious recruitment was to stop, so long as the atrocities don't stop, people will continue being recruited. For Boko Haram in Nigeria, there was a study by two organizations, UNDP, but also the Network of Religious and Traditional Peacemakers, which is based in Finland. Their study came up with 8.9, so approximately 9%, less than 10% of Boko Haram members who were arrested. When you listen to their stories, less than 10% were actually motivated by religion. Yeah. So less than 10% were what you call religious radicalization. Having said that, 10% of 1,000 people is 100. 100 terrorists is still dangerous. But just on the scale of the size of the problem, 90% of the problem has other causes that have little to do with religion. So on the intra-faith side, who will people listen to depends on who's your target. The government always has negotiators who try to speak with Boko Haram. The Swiss have been playing an important role there because they don't come with a lot of the colonial baggage that the British or the Americans or any of these have had. And they've been very successful in getting asylum, people to go for asylum instead of fighting, for kidnappings, all sorts of negotiations. So depends on the kind of conflict, what role religious scholars can play. So in some places, they can play a very, very important role. But when it gets too hot and dangerous, they also are people with families.
Okay. I think that we have to thank our invitees, our participants, Father Stephen, Matthias Yake, and Nuruddin Lamu, and of course Clara, to whom I will give the final word. But before that, I cannot resist. You remembered me, Simon and Garfunkel. Bridges over troubled water.
No, I think that just the final words to conclude, and building on what you have presented on the numbers, that on the percentage of people that state that they have been involved with Boko Haram, not for religious reasons, but because other sorts of grievances are present, and because the literature also stresses the fact that religion is very rarely the only cause. I think that in addition to promoting inter-religious dialogue, it is important to think of and to come up within the different religious communities, but also in collaboration with the state and with the international community and with other grassroots movements, the introduction of public policies and social policies specifically, and of other forms of action that will guarantee social and economic development, and also that will guarantee that we're able to build fairer societies, because in addition to vaccinating people's minds against the disease, to use your metaphor, it's also important to give them the conditions so that they're in a situation that's comfortable enough so that other viruses do not infect them, right? And I was also thinking that the idea of bridges and of using mediators and of trying to expand the number of people within the community that will support the construction of a bridge before investing in building the bridge itself could also be applied not just in cases of extreme polarization regarding religion, but also to deal with other concerns that we're currently facing and that create us and a them. So territorial divisions, economic divisions, the idea of us and them, that has to do with racism and xenophobia, for instance. So I think that we have a lot to learn from the experiences that you have been conducting, and that we can also take those lessons and apply them to respond to other cases. So it was really interesting to listening to you all. Thank you for everything.
Okay, thank you, everybody. Let's close up and wish you a good weekend. Thank you.